Hello students! In this video, I will explain how to use the present continuous and the present simple. These tenses are very common in the English language, so it's important to understand them well. You can pause the video or rewind it and listen to it over again as many times as you need to until you're satisfied that you have understood the theory. So let's start with the present continuous. How is the present continuous formed? The present continuous is made from the present tense of the verb be with the ing form of the verb. For example, in the affirmative we say, I am studying, you are studying, he is studying, she is studying, it is studying, we, you, they are studying. Now, in spoken English or in informal written English, we often use short forms. So we say, I'm studying, you're studying, he's studying, she's studying, it's studying, we're studying, you're studying, they're studying. We make questions by putting am, is, or are in front of the subject. So we say, am I studying? Are you studying? Is he studying? Is she studying? Is it studying? Are we, are you, are they studying? We make negatives by putting not after am, is, or are, and we say, I am not studying, you are not studying, he is not studying, she is not studying, it is not studying, we are not studying, you are not studying, they are not studying. We also use the short forms in spoken English or in informal written English, and we say, I'm not studying, you aren't, or you are not studying. She isn't, or she's not studying. We aren't, or we're not studying, etc. Some common keywords that we use with the present continuous are time words like now, right now, at the moment, this week, these days, for the time being, and words like look and listen. Now let's look at the spelling rules. Verbs ending in E drop the E and take ing. For example, in write, we drop the final E and we add ing, writing, ing. Take, we drop the final E and it becomes taking with ing. However, verbs ending in double E, like agree or see, do not drop the E. We just add ing. Now, verbs ending in one stressed vowel between two consonants double the last consonant and take ing. For example, swim, swimming with double M. Why? Because W is a consonant, it is followed by a stressed vowel, and then there is a final consonant. So we double the last consonant in swimming. Begin, G is a consonant, I is the stressed vowel, N is the last consonant, so we double the last consonant before we add ing, beginning with double N, and so on. In British English, verbs ending in L double the L and take ing. Travel, traveling with double L. Finally, verbs ending in IE drop the IE and take Y and then ing. For example, lie ends in IE. Lying, we drop IE, it becomes Y, and then we add ing. Die, dying, we drop IE, we add Y, and then we add ing. Now, when do we use the present continuous? We use the present continuous to talk about actions happening now. Please be quiet. The children are sleeping. The children are sleeping now at the moment of speaking. We use the present continuous for temporary actions. Temporary means for a short period of time. I'm working in London for the next 2 weeks. That's not my permanent job, that's something temporary. We also use it with always to express annoyance for actions happening too often. For example, you're always interrupting me. We use it for future plans or arrangements. Example, what are you doing next week? This is something that we plan or that we have arranged. We also use it for something which is changing, growing, or developing. For example, your English is improving. And we use it to describe actions in a photo. For example, look at John in this photo. He's climbing a wall. Now, we cannot use continuous tenses with stative verbs, and we'll come back to that to explain what stative verbs are and why we cannot use them in the continuous tenses. Now, how do we form short answers? In short answers, we use only yes or no, the subject pronoun, and the verb to be. We do not repeat the main verb. Let's look at some examples. Are you drawing a picture? No, I'm not. Is he playing tennis? No, he isn't. Is she carrying a bag? Yes, she is. Are they having dinner? Yes, they are. Now let's move on to the present simple. How is the present simple formed? The present tense is the base form of the verb. I play, you play, but with the third person singular, he, she, it, we add s to the end of the verb. For example, he plays, she plays, it plays. We drop the s for the other subjects. We play, you play, they play. To make questions, we use the auxiliary verb, the helping verb, do. And we use does for the third person singular. But when we use does, the s at the end of the verb disappears. For example, we say, do I play? Do you play? Does he play? Does she play? Does it play? Do we play? Do you play? Do they play? To make negatives, we use don't and we use doesn't for the third person singular. Again, when we use doesn't, we drop the s at the end of the verb and we say, I don't play, you don't play, he doesn't play. Notice that the s from play disappears. She doesn't play, it doesn't play. We don't play, you don't play, they don't play. We use don't and doesn't in spoken English or in informal written English. And we use do not and does not when we write formal texts or when we want to create emphasis. So when we use the full form, we say, I do not play, you do not play, he does not play, she does not play, we do not play, etc. Some keywords that we use with the simple present are time words like every day, once a week, on Mondays, at the weekends, in the morning, etc. And adverbs of frequency like always, usually, often, sometimes, rarely, seldom, never, etc. Let's see what happens with WH questions. We use the question form, we use the auxiliary to make the question after WH words, for example, who, what, when, and where, except when you're asking about the subject. Let's look at some examples. Who do you meet every day? Who is the object of meet. You is the subject of meet. So when who is the object, we use the question form. We use the auxiliary verb do. Let's look at the next example. Who helps you with your homework? In this case, who is the subject of helps. That's why we do not use the question form. We do not use the auxiliary verb do. Also, we say, what work do you do? What work is the object of do you do. That's why we use the question form, do you do. We use the auxiliary verb to form the question. But we ask, what happens now? We don't use the question form because what is the subject of happens. And when it's the subject, we do not use the auxiliary verb to make the question. Let's look at the spelling rules for the third person singular. We saw that the verb in the third person singular takes an S, but there are some cases where the ending is different. So, verbs ending in double S, SH, CH, X, and O take ES. For example, he passes, he washes, he teaches, he fixes, he goes, etc. Verbs ending in a consonant plus Y, drop the Y and take IES. I study with a Y, he studies, IES. I try, ending in Y, we drop Y and we add IES, he tries. But verbs ending in a vowel plus Y take S. For example, she plays, she says, etc. Now the suffix of the third person singular is pronounced in 3 different ways. And you don't have to memorize this rule because you will eventually learn how to pronounce the ending correctly just by listening to how native speakers pronounce it. But let's take a look at the rule anyway. So, the suffix of the third person is pronounced s in verbs ending in the sound f, k, p, and tu. For example, he coughs, he takes, he helps, he repeats. The ending is pronounced as is in verbs ending in s, sh, ch, j, and zu. He misses, he washes, he touches, he changes, he loses. And finally, the ending of the third person is pronounced as z in verbs ending in any other sound. For example, she gives, she says, she runs, she reads, she tries, etc. Now, when do we use the present simple? We use the present simple when something is generally or always true. More specifically, we use it to describe permanent situations. Permanent means something that is for always. For example, where do you live? Also, we use it for habits or daily routines. For example, she gets up at 8 o'clock every day. For general truths or laws of nature. For example, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. To talk about timetables or programs. For example, the bus leaves every 15 minutes. This is based on a fixed schedule. We also use the simple present in the if clause in the first conditional and in the if clause and the main clause of the zero conditional. For example, if it rains, we won't come. This is an example of the first conditional. It expresses something real or possible in the present or future, and in the if clause of the first conditional, we use the simple present if it rains. Here is an example of the zero conditional. If I sleep too late, I miss my morning class. And in the zero conditional, we use the simple present both in the if clause and in the main clause. Sleep and I miss. We also use it to talk about what happens in books, movies, or plays. For example, Harry Potter goes to Hogwarts School. He has 2 close friends, Hermione and Ron. And we use the simple present to talk about the future after time words such as when, until, before, after, as soon as, etc. For example, he will call you when he has time. We don't say when he will have time, even though we're talking about the future. We say when he has time because we do not use the future in time clauses. Now, we often use adverbs of frequency with the present simple. Adverbs of frequency tell us how often something happens. For example, Peter works in an office. He always starts work at 8 o'clock. That's 100% of the time. He usually goes to work in his car. That's 75% of the time. He often has lunch in the evening. That's 50% of the time. He sometimes works overtime. That's 25% of the time. He is rarely late for work. That's 10%. He can never work at the weekends. That's 0%. Now, what is the position of adverbs of frequency in a sentence? They go before the main verb. For example, he always starts work at 8 o'clock. They go after the verb to be. For example, he's rarely late. And after the auxiliary verbs, the helping verbs. The adverbs rarely, seldom, and never have a negative meaning, and they are always followed by a verb in the affirmative. For example, he can never work at the weekends. Now, in short answers, we only use yes or no, the subject pronoun, and do, don't, does, or doesn't. We do not repeat the main verb. For example, do you get up early? Yes, I do. Does he speak French? No, he doesn't. What's the difference between the present simple and the present continuous? We use the present simple to talk about permanent situations. Permanent is for always. For daily routines and habits. For example, what do you do in your free time? And we use the present continuous to talk about actions happening now or temporary actions. Temporary is for short periods of time. For example, what are you doing now? Finally, let's look at the stative verbs. Stative verbs do not describe actions. They describe states. For example, mental states, emotional states, possession, and so on. We can use action verbs in continuous tenses because actions can be in progress. But we don't use stative verbs in continuous tenses because states are not in progress. Let me give you an example. If I say, Maria is watching a film in English and she understands it easily. She is watching a film is an action, but she understands it is a mental state. So stative verbs are used in the present simple, not in the present continuous or any continuous tense. Stative verbs include verbs of the senses like see, hear, feel, taste, smell, sound, look, seem, appear, etc. Verbs of thinking like know, agree, disagree, believe, think, understand, remember, forget, mean like what do you mean, I mean that, recognize, realize, etc. Verbs which express likes and dislikes, like, dislike, love, hate, want, prefer, wish, etc. And other verbs which show possession, for example, like have, belong, possess, own, and other verbs like owe, like in I owe you nothing, I owe you everything, need, include, matter, like it doesn't matter, cost, weigh, etc. Let's look at some examples. We say, I love this song No one will say, I am loving. We say, I understand you. We don't say, I am understanding. We say, I don't know the answer. No one will say, I am not knowing. We say, he seems happy. No one will say, he's seeming. We say, do you have a pen? Because it shows possession. But if I say, I'm having breakfast, I'm having lunch, I'm having dinner, I'm having a shower, I'm having a party, it's an activity, it's not possession. The meaning is different, so in that case, I will use the present continuous. Another example, you look fantastic. But if I say, I am looking for someone, I am looking for something, it means I'm searching for someone or something. This is an action, it's not a state. If it's an action, I can use it in the continuous tenses. Another example, this cake tastes wonderful. But if I say, the chef is tasting the soup, this is an action. For example, he's tasting the soup to see if it needs more salt and things like that. And we also say, I think that's a good idea. We don't say, I am thinking that's a good idea, because I think here expresses an opinion. But if I say, I am thinking about it, it's an action in progress. So we would use the present continuous. And that's the end of this lesson. These are the sources I used for this lesson. Thank you very much for listening.